Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking mobility strategy and planning for Dynamics 365 with Ivan Stano, COO of Resco. This episode is sponsored by Resco, and we start out discussing a major deadline looming for Dynamics 365 Field Service customers. If you're listening to this and are yourself a Field Service customer or supporting Field Service customers, hopefully you already know that Microsoft's current mobile app is reaching end of life in June 2022, and with that comes a decision on how to transition, either to Microsoft's new Power Platform-based app or to a third-party solution like Resco's Field Service app. We'll break down those options and decisions. We also discuss some of the broader mobile technology challenges faced by Microsoft customers today, interesting future-looking technology, and Resco's plans in the Dynamics space beyond Field Service. All right. Well, Ivan Stano, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Why don't we start with a bit of an introduction in case people don't know who you are, what you do.
Shall we start with the company or myself?
Let's start with yourself.
Okay, sounds fair. So, I'm Ivan Stano. I'm a COO and evangelist at Resco. I've been with the company for over 13 years. Started in our European headquarters, and about 9 years ago, I moved over to the United States of America, and now I live here just outside of Boston.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the podcast today. Yeah, a lot to discuss. And I think the primary thing that I wanted to start with was a deadline that's looming. And that's something that always gets, enterprise software people's attention. There's a deadline looming for Dynamics customers around Field Service and actually an end of life, right? Can we start by just having you explain what that is and what's coming up that you've certainly been talking about and that people should be aware of?
Yeah, it truly is quite a big news for a lot of Dynamics 365 Field Service customers. So what's going on? I'll try to be brief, but about 3 years ago, we signed an agreement with Microsoft to provide Resco technology for the Dynamics 365 Field Service mobile app, right? And this solution or this technology has been baked into the Dynamics 365 Field Service product, and it was provided as part of the Field Service license for all of the customers globally. And what's happening this June 30th is that Microsoft announced it's the end of life of the Resco-based mobile application, also probably known as the Xamarin app. So all the customers are advised to switch either to the Power App application or seek other options.
Yeah, and this is something that it's been planned for a while, so hopefully most Dynamics 365 Field Service customers know about it already. I'm sure, and I also know that your team has been doing quite a bit of work to make sure that the people are clear on what some of those choices are. But how would you say that's going so far? Are most customers, have most of them made their decision? Is there still a lot of conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. The news, as you said, it's not really new. It was announced publicly by Microsoft more than a year or about a year ago, I guess, at least. So hopefully a lot of customers are aware of the situation and are planning to do some steps because the time is really ticking. And we're trying to help in the conversation to actually explain to a lot of customers what's going on. That's something that we're facing or actually seeing in the market, customers coming back to us, trying to understand what this really means for them, right? And we're trying to be as helpful as we can. And we still have that one goal in front of us. And that's we're trying to not compete against Microsoft, but compete with Microsoft to really make sure that the Dynamics Field Service customers are getting the best experiences, whether they choose Resco or not. So that's really our goal. All the customers who reach out will try to explain the situation and make sure they're aware of their options. End of the day, we're seeing that it's usually the partner that the customers work with who has more access to the customer because they usually know all the details, the customizations and configurations that has been done in the past and can help with the overall decision as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think I've seen some of the writing that your team has done, either in articles or in sort of ebooks or reports to help people break down the decision. And there's some pretty important decision points in deciding whether to go with. And maybe we can talk a little about the choices that they're making. It's between going with sort of a Power platform-based mobile solution that Microsoft is rolling out, or continuing with a solution built by Resco that's no longer sort of baked in, it's no longer part of that OEM agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's carrying forward the same technology stack, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, exactly. Those are, I think, the primary two options that customers are considering. Should we switch to the Power App and rely on the application provided as part of the Power Platform, the Power App, or should we leverage all the work that has been done inside or in the Resco technology and just go with Resco and continue that trend? So it really depends. We actually identified several areas that might play a key role when customers need to decide. And probably the most important one is the needs of offline capabilities. That's something that we've invested in more than a decade of really hard work and countless of different use cases and implementations pretty much all over the world that helped us to really improve the offline capability. So that's one area. The other one is the complexity of the mobile app, right? We see some customers who have lots of customizations built into the solution on top of the Resco technology, and to replicate that would require quite a lot of effort. So that's definitely another area to be aware of. And the third one is the usability and familiarity with the solution. So that we sometimes hear from customers as one of the reasons they're considering staying with Resco. All their technicians are already familiar with the app. They know how to use it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. So there's no need to retrain the staff to a new application as well.
I thought maybe we could step back a little ways to maybe look at how Resco's history with Dynamics has evolved over time. I mean, you mentioned that 3 years ago, there was this agreement for related to D365 Field Service. I imagine just in those 3 years, a lot has changed, but does the company's history go back further with Microsoft?
Definitely, Jason. It was a fun ride. So as I mentioned, I've been with Resco for over a decade, and we've been providing the mobility capabilities or experiences for Dynamics customers for about 12 years, I guess. So shortly after I joined Resco. So we have a great and very rich history, and I'm sure that some of the listeners, if they recognize the companies that I'll mention, it will bring some memories. But when we started the mobile journey in Dynamics CRM space back then, there were already two big players providing mobile solutions. It was a Dutch company called CWR Mobility, and then a Canadian company called 10 Digits. And obviously, Microsoft always had some kind of mobile application or mobile experience for their customers as well. So it was a really fun time, lots of competition, but in a very friendly manner as well. And over the years, it pretty much became a rivalry between CWR Mobility and Resco that we effectively kind of ended in 2015 when we acquired CWR's mobility line of business, their technology and customers, and pretty much remain the only mobile ISV in the Dynamics CRM channel. So there's a lot of history. There's a lot of lessons learned over the years that helped us to understand how the Dynamics ecosystem works, what's the role of ISVs, Microsoft partners, what customers expect from mobility, etc. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do recognize those names, although it had been a while for either of them, but that's interesting. And in just maybe the last 3 years or 5 years, I think the field service as a product from Microsoft has been really significant from what I can tell. And certainly the growth has been very significant in terms of, I know last year we saw some really impressive metrics around just the sort of scale, the way the product is sort of scaling in the cloud and the way companies are adding, assets and different kinds of data to manage their field service. From your perspective, what have you seen of that kind of growth in the last few years?
It's amazing, Jason, for sure. The Microsoft team is definitely on the right mission. They're doing a lot of great decisions and the right things. And we've been part of it even before Microsoft Field Service as a product became part of the Microsoft Dynamics portfolio. We actually partnered in 2011 with a company called Field One Systems. Mm-hmm. If anybody remembers that team, they actually decided to build the field service solution on top of Dynamics CRM or XRM. Some people called it back then. and they used Resco as their underlying technology for the mobile piece. So we partnered with them, and in, 2016, 2015 as well, they were acquired by Microsoft, and eventually it became the base of the Dynamics 365 Field Service product as we know it now. So I can tell you that we've been part of the journey even before it became part of Microsoft, and we see that tremendous story from license number one to what Microsoft is doing right now, right? And those numbers are astonishing, and it's a really great global success. I just read every Gartner's Magic Quadrant every year, and I can wait every time to see how well Microsoft Field Service is doing, being the leader in that Magic Quadrant. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think thinking back to the last Gartner report I saw, I mean, they really do put Dynamics 365 Field Service right up there with really any competitor in terms of its, I guess, market share and capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for me, you talked about Field One, and I mean, boy, when you talk about acquisitions that the business applications group at Microsoft has made, it's hard to think of one that's actually worked as well as the Field One acquisition has. And maybe that's because they had their roots right kind of in the platform as opposed to just being floating totally outside of it like other less successful product acquisitions or company acquisitions had been. But yeah, I mean, boy, taking it from where it was, which I think was, as I understood, it was a solid product, but it was pretty small. I mean, really not too big at all. I mean, maybe in the, 7-8 figure range to something that in revenue to something that's much bigger now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also, as you mentioned, like the product was so baked into the Dynamics technology, right? Into that platform, which was a big part of the success. But I also think the team was amazing. To this point, I'm in touch with some of the people who were originally part of Field One Systems team, and they're still with Microsoft. And I think that's a great sign that those people knew what they were doing and they were great in their roles.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good indicator if you see people post-acquisition staying with Microsoft and getting sort of really kind of integrating into their R&D organization or professional services even, I suppose, product development. Yeah, that's a great sign that things are not falling apart for a product that's been acquired. And the opposite is kind of also true. It's a little worrying when you see everyone just kind of leave and
jumping the ship as soon as the acquisition is done. Exactly. And here that's quite the opposite. I know Dan Gittler, who I met over the years, I don't know how many times, and he's in charge of one big module, which is part of Dynamics Field Service as well. So yeah, it's just awesome.
In terms of looking ahead with, Microsoft's plans in particular, are there any particular areas that you are watching for that you think they are putting, some interesting work into? I mean, to me, and I'll just add, Field Service sort of sits at the crux of so many of Microsoft's broader stories right now. So I don't know, anything in particular that you are excited about in terms of what they're choosing to do?
I think there's so many things going on. It's really hard to pick one, to be honest. And Field Service, it's such a complex solution, right? And I think Microsoft is doing a really great job trying to cover most of the corners and really doing things right. We see a big push with the Power Platform going forward. I think RSO, the resource scheduling optimization, it's a great product that is suitable for some of the most complex needs out on the market as well. And I'm also kind of very excited about the remote assist solution backed by the HoloLens, because to me, it's kind of really cool use case that I just hope that will pick up soon.
I did actually want to ask you about, augmented reality and remote assistance, because that's an area that Resco is also supporting these days, right? Or working on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We have a product that we call Resco Houston, which is really aiming to provide extra capabilities for people in the field. And the AR-based video calls are part of it, but that's definitely not the only thing that it does. Because end of the day, Jason, how many times people are going to call, when they're in trouble, in real time and get some hints drawn on top of the screen? But in reality, I think that's the cherry on top of the pie. But big part of our product is also instructions, guides, manuals, etc., that are handy for technicians when they need them, or generally the field workers when they need them. And I think that's something that has a potential to add a lot of value on a day-to-day basis.
I saw there's also voice operated capabilities. Is that important?
Definitely. There are some really heavy use cases when the users need to have both of their hands available, right, to do their job.
Sure.
As a funny example, I'm not really sure how many of our customers really use it, but we have provided capabilities of our technology on smartwatches. So basically you can start your work on a mobile phone, right? And then you get to the site and you just use your smartwatch to answer the questions, collect data, and you can operate it with voice, especially on the Android watch that allows us to access the, what is it called on Android? The Google Assistant. And, really, really do all your work without the need to look at the screen or hold your phone in one of your hands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And looking forward, how are you planning in terms of your engagement with field service? We have this very important deadline coming up as we started talking about, and some customers will obviously go the Power Platform route. Some will see the value in Resco's field service solution and some of the strengths that it has. I guess some will also opt for something else, right? Maybe like a fully custom mobile development or some other, something else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you sort of have an outlook on what that new landscape is going to look like?
Yeah, I think you pretty much named the what I consider the three main options. Power App, Resco. We actually created a special, what we call program called Resco Field Service 2.0 to kind of make that little specialization in Resco's field service. And some of the customers might consider custom development. And I'm just really asking everybody out there, if you really don't have to, rather choose one of the two than custom development. I've personally seen, maybe 10, 15 different cases when custom development just didn't go well because the mindset is not right? In mobility, it's not like, I do it once and I'm done for years. It's an ongoing project because we have new operating system, new phones, new devices, new versions of Dynamics Field Service as well. So it's really a project with no deadline, which is hard. So the Power Apps and Resco, I think, are the better choices unless you have something really, really unique. And our future, so definitely the areas that I mentioned before are something that where Resco can fit really well. We plan to stay there and provide those capabilities. We've already seen a pretty significant growth last year of customers just choosing Resco right away. We have quite a lot of conversations going on right now as we're getting to the June 30th deadline. A lot of customers, we have verbal agreements that they want to stay with Resco, which is amazing. Actually, I didn't expect such a mass to come to us, and we want to really be their partner, right? That was something that we always did in the past, and I guess it was one of the reasons of our success as a company, that we listen very closely to the feedback we get from the customers. Some of the customers, if they're big enough, they can even influence our roadmap and what we're adding, what they need to see, etc. We're still nimble and relatively small to be able to move quickly.
Yeah, and really totally dedicated to these mobile solutions. Yeah,
which are quite unique, I have to say.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone who's purchased, business software and covered it and worked in it, there's, I think, a lot of people that kind of appreciate the value in that dedication and focus, right? Because that's, especially for something specialized like mobility, it's hard to make it a secondary part of someone's business and really trust it.
Exactly. And that's what I think the companies are acknowledging more and more, that uniqueness of deskless workers, right? Or people who really do their job outside of the office. They don't have the luxury of big screens, quote unquote, fat clients, right? Where you can always be connected, etc., and do your job. So the mobile environment puts your software often to the edge, right? Or to the limits of what you can do. So that's pretty much the idea of Resco as well, as a company, and our mission to really try to find the best ways how we can enable these field workers, no matter where they work, when they work, and how tough the conditions are.
Yeah, I wanted to get into some of those challenges a bit. I don't know, are there any that are really top of mind for you that you find your team dealing with, or maybe even supporting your partners on, whether it's the types of environments, like you said, or some of the technology?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try to give you maybe some examples, right? Because I think those work the best usually. So one of them is definitely the connected or the online-offline capability, right? So we work with several companies who choose Resco exactly because of these needs. And what we've seen over the last 3-4 years are like complete extremes that I've never seen before. One example is a company in adventure tourism. They bring their customers on ships to North Pole and Antarctica and spend there 2-3 weeks, taking them to different tours. And they chose Resco because right there, you can forget about any signal, and satellite connection is just too expensive. So they chose Resco. Or another example, I hope I don't say too much, but they've been speaking at our annual conference called Resco Next before, so hopefully that's fine. It's really the most amazing utilization of Resco's offline capabilities. It's a project by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So they decided to use Resco in the refugee camps for refugee identification and data collection purposes. And they literally use Resco in all over the world and in conditions unseen, like days and days in disconnected mode. And then they use actually many times satellite connection to send all the collected data to their servers in Geneva, Switzerland, which is truly mind blowing. I think we have a couple of blogs about that use case on our website as well. So that would be kind of the example of the robustness of Resco technology. And I know that might seem like, okay, that's really kind of ultimate use case, but it works for I hope it demonstrates the capabilities of Resco. So if you have, like people who use it on a daily basis, and sometimes they go into the basement or underground or in the sea or areas with poor connection, I'm pretty sure that Resco can really excel there. That would be probably the biggest one I see.
I'm just curious. I mean, one of the things I remember from maybe the earlier days of mobile applications gaining momentum in the market was the pain of various mobile platforms and building for them. Has that changed at all? Has that story gotten less painful?
Somewhat. I think with the success of the web technologies, it's a little bit less of a pain. Resco still provides native applications, as we still think that the web apps, as great as or web technologies, as great as they are, they don't allow us to provide a similar experience as the native apps in terms of performance, user experience, but also all the features and functionality that we build into them and the deep support of the cool features of the smartphones, right? So from that point of view, if you're really serious about the outcome and how powerful and effective your mobile app is, I think it still can be an issue, and Resco gets you covered there, right? We have one platform that works on all devices, Android, iOS, Windows devices as well. And we support a web app now as well. So definitely it can be an issue, especially if you have, for example, bring your own device policy, right? And you don't really know what kind of devices your people going to bring.
I was just trying to think what else. I mean, I know that the company is making more efforts more broadly in the Dynamics 365 space. Do you want to touch on that at all?
We're definitely planning to move out of the Dynamics 365 customer engagement family of products and become more of a robust mobile platform for other Dynamics solutions. We have a number of pilots right now with customers using Dynamics Business Central, which I know has a tremendous growth, and there's a lot of interest in that product. So we're bringing the great mobile capabilities for the Business Central customers, also enriched with some additional functionality around scheduling, data collection, and simple field service functionality as well. So that's definitely something which is on our radar, and partners and customers should see some news around that very soon.
All right, excellent. Where else can people see Resco, talk to Resco in the near future?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. I really hope to join some of the in-person conferences soon. We always supported and sponsored a lot of events every year, and I just can't wait to meet with all the partners and customers face to face. One that we are supporting very soon is DynamicsCon, and even though it's virtual one, we have a session there. It should be very interesting. It's coming as a feedback from a lot of customers, and we're going to compare the capabilities of PowerApp and Resco technology. So that should definitely bring some interesting conversations.
Yeah, maybe some interesting questions and comments too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those events do tend to have people speaking up and actively chatting throughout sessions. So yeah, that should be a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. And I should mention, just because it doesn't come up very often on the podcast, and you mentioned you're from Massachusetts. I'm also from Massachusetts, which is kind of rare on this podcast. People are obviously all over the place when we talk, but you're a Red Sox fan. I should just come out and say it, right? I'm a Red Sox fan. You're a Red Sox fan. That's maybe the first on the podcast. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. Maybe.
Yeah. We
yeah.
have to change that, Jason. Well, I tell you who not to invite. I tell you who to invite though as well. But you definitely don't want to invite Scott Lefanti, the Microsoft MVP. He's a diehard Yankees fan. So every time I have a chance to rub it in his face, I do that. And then Sean Tabor, if you know him, he's another MVP. He's actually a huge Red Sox fan, and he knows everything about field service. So he's a great resource to talk to.
Good to know. And for the record, I would never shun anyone for liking the Yankees. I might just give them a bit of a hard time. And
we can invite them to Boston and then show them.
There you go. Yeah. And Microsoft has some good Red Sox fans, or has had, I should say, over the years. Mike Ehrenberg, Red Sox fan.
Uh-huh.
And there have been others. I think some have left the company, but yeah, it's certainly a known thing there. And it also, I think, interesting, since you said you moved to the US 9 years ago. So is this something you've acquired just being in the area, or?
I think so. Once you live in Boston, I think there's no way around it. I think it's Red Sox, and especially the stadium, right? It's more of an institution, I think, than just sports.
Yeah, interesting. That does happen to people when they live there. Great. Well, Ivan, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been fun chatting, and I really look forward to seeing what's next with Resco. Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason. It was a pleasure. Have a great day. This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Ivan for joining me. Partners and customers who want more information on the mobile transition we discussed can go to www.resco.net/transition. To learn more about Resco, please also check out their white papers, ebooks, case studies, videos, and more on MSDW. We will put a link in the show notes. You can also find Resco at DynamicsCon 2022, which is happening the week that this is published. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. And for all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.